Throughout human history, we've witnessed incredible achievements and progress. But alongside these triumphs, there are chapters so dark, they challenge our very understanding of humanity. Today, we delve into one such chapter, the Atlantic slave trade. What you are about to hear may shock you. It is a story that is often glossed over in our history books, a story that many of us have never fully learned. But it is a truth we must face if we are to understand our past and build a more just future. Between 1500 and 1880 CE, an estimated 12.5 million African people were forcibly taken from their homes and loaded onto ships bound for the Americas. This wasn't migration, it was a mass abduction on an unprecedented scale, forever changing the course of human history. The majority of these enslaved individuals came from 6 primary regions in Africa: Senegambia, Sierra Leone, and the Windward Coast, the Gold Coast, the Bight of Benin, the Bight of Biafra, and West Central Africa. But these weren't just nameless masses, they were individuals with rich cultures and complex societies. Before their captivity, many were skilled artisans, blacksmiths forging intricate metalwork, weavers creating vibrant textiles, and sculptors crafting beautiful artifacts. Others were farmers, cultivating crops like yams, millet, and sorghum. Some were merchants, traveling vast distances to trade goods. Many were part of sophisticated kingdoms with complex political systems, like the Empire of Mali or the Kingdom of Congo. The journey these captives endured, known as the Middle Passage, was a nightmare beyond imagination. Packed into ships' holds, people were given spaces as small as 6 feet by 1 foot 4 inches, barely larger than a coffin. The air was stifling, filled with the stench of disease and human waste. Food was scarce, often just a handful of beans or rice each day. Water rations were minimal, sometimes as little as a quart a day in the scorching heat. It's estimated that about 15% of those who embarked on this hellish voyage didn't survive to see the other side of the Atlantic. That's over 1.8 million lives lost in transit, more than the entire population of Philadelphia today. But death wasn't always quick. Many suffered for weeks or months before succumbing to disease, malnutrition, or despair. For those who survived, a life of unimaginable hardship awaited. Upon reaching the Americas, these human beings were sold at markets, much like livestock. Some were branded with hot irons, a physical mark of ownership seared into their flesh. Families were torn apart, with children often separated from their parents, never to see each other again. But this isn't just a story about numbers and statistics. It's about the human cost of greed and the depths of cruelty that humans are capable of inflicting upon one another. It's about the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. And it's about a legacy that continues to shape our world today. The Atlantic slave trade was part of a larger economic system known as the triangular trade. European ships would sail to Africa with manufactured goods, textiles, weapons, and ironware. These would be exchanged for enslaved Africans. The captives would then be transported to the Americas and sold. The ships would return to Europe laden with raw materials produced by slave labor: sugar, tobacco, cotton, and later coffee and cocoa. This trade reshaped the global economy. It fueled the Industrial Revolution in Europe, providing both the raw materials for factories and the capital to build them. It led to the development of new financial instruments, including insurance and joint stock companies. The wealth generated by slave labor helped fund the growth of cities like Liverpool, Bristol, and Nantes. But while Europe and the Americas grew rich, Africa was devastated. Economists estimate that the continent's economic output in 1950 was lower than it had been in 1800. The constant warfare and raiding to capture slaves disrupted agriculture and trade. Whole regions were depopulated, with some estimates suggesting that Africa's population in 1850 was half what it would have been without the slave trade. In the Americas, the lives of enslaved people were dominated by brutal labor and constant fear. On Caribbean sugar plantations, the work was so grueling and conditions so harsh that many enslaved people didn't survive more than a few years. In the American South, cotton plantations expanded rapidly in the early 19th century, driven by the invention of the cotton gin. This led to a second forced migration, as hundreds of thousands of enslaved people were forcibly moved from the Upper South to the Deep South. Now, you might be wondering, how could this happen? How could millions of people be enslaved and transported across an ocean? The answer is complex and involves multiple parties. European nations, driven by economic greed and racist ideologies, were the primary instigators and beneficiaries of this trade. Portugal led the way, followed by Spain, Britain, France, the Netherlands, Denmark, and later, the United States. These countries passed laws and created companies to facilitate the trade. They built forts along the African coast to serve as holding pens for captives and trading posts for slave merchants. But it's also important to note that some African leaders and merchants were complicit in this trade. They would capture people from rival tribes or communities and sell them to European traders. This doesn't absolve the European slave traders of their crimes, but it does highlight the complex and often painful history of this period. Yet, in the face of this oppression, there was always resistance. Enslaved people fought back in countless ways, from small acts of defiance to full-scale rebellions. One of the most dramatic examples occurred in 1839 aboard the slave ship Amistad. A group of recently captured Africans, led by a man named Joseph Cinque, managed to break free of their chains and take control of the ship. Their subsequent legal battle in the United States became a landmark case in the fight against slavery. In the Caribbean, resistance took on an even larger scale. In Haiti, enslaved people launched a revolution in 1791 that eventually led to the creation of the first independent Black Republic in 1804. This sent shockwaves through the slave-owning societies of the Americas. As awareness of the horrors of slavery grew, abolition movements gained strength in Europe and the Americas. In Britain, figures like William Wilberforce campaigned tirelessly against the slave trade, leading to its abolition in the British Empire in 1807. The United States followed suit in 1808, though smuggling continued for years afterward. The effects of this dark chapter in history are still felt today. The wealth disparities between nations, systemic racism, and the ongoing struggle for equality in many societies can all trace their roots back to this period. In the United States, studies have shown that the economic impact of slavery continues to affect African American communities, contributing to disparities in wealth, education, and health outcomes. Moreover, the cultural impact of the slave trade is immeasurable. It led to the creation of new cultures and identities, as enslaved Africans and their descendants adapted and resisted in the face of oppression. The music, art, cuisine, and languages of the Americas all bear the imprint of this forced migration. As we conclude this exploration of the Atlantic slave trade, it's natural to feel a range of emotions: shock, anger, sadness. These are appropriate responses to learning about one of the greatest crimes in human history. But let's not stop at emotional reactions. Let's use this knowledge to fuel action. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it. We can work to address the lingering effects of this history. We can strive to create societies that truly value the dignity and rights of all human beings. And perhaps most importantly, we can commit to never allowing such a tragedy to occur again. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of history's darkest chapters. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that explores the lesser-known aspects of our shared human history. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep striving for a better world.